governance and transparency in Indian law. And I'll talk about enforcement the last, because I think it's the most important part. What the Companies Act does not bring better enforcement. That's I think involves more human qualities of how regulators run, how kind of the government runs. So let me start with two definitions of corporate governance which you may not have heard elsewhere. The first is from my former boss, Mr. Damodar, and he defines corporate governance in Mahatma Gandhi's words, that the ends don't justify the means. And that actually captures a lot of soft issues around corporate governance. Corporate governance is not tick boxing. If it was tick boxing, then Satyam would have been the best company on earth. It wasn't. It won the Golden Peacock Award for corporate governance because it ticked all the right boxes. But was it the best governed company? We discovered in that fateful December that the board had actually, this couple of weeks before the fraud got unraveled, we discovered that the board had actually completely abandoned their duties to their shareholders. The second definition is my definition, which is, I find corporate governance as the glue. It's the glue between shareholders, promoters, or control persons and the company itself. And I call it a glue because I think it enhances value for everybody. And of course, as we've seen, shareholders are not everybody today. 10 years back, I think the word stakeholder was a dirty word. Today, I think it's gained wide acceptability that a company owes its duty not just to shareholders but to stakeholders. So I would like to kind of start with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., the famous civil rights activist who was assassinated in the 1960s in the US. And he said that, I know I cannot get a law which will force the white man to love me, but at least I can get a law which will prevent me from being lynched to death. And I think the Companies Act 2013 really gives new tools to prevent the lynching of the stakeholders and the community in general, besides, of course, the shareholders. So I'll just very briefly touch on the various transparency initiatives, governance initiatives, which are there in 2000. I know we are short of time, but I'll try to capture it as quickly as possible. I think the positives of all the checks and balances, including the auditor rotation, which is there, which I support, which I'm sure many auditors don't support. But I think it's a good check and balance. It's not going to solve all the problems with auditors. It's not going to solve the problems of withdrawing audit reports, for example. But it will have a small but perceptible impact on the governance of companies. The concept of the independent directors has been strengthened. More powers being given to them, at the same time more responsibility being cast on them. So those of you who are independent directors, I think you need to have stronger shoulders now. The concept of shareholder representative, which was alien previously, I think it's an important if only a nominal change, because it depends on each company whether they want minority shareholder representative or not. Audit committees, the entire system has been strengthened further. There have been various restrictions on related party transactions which have also been strengthened compared to the previous law. Fraud has been I have not done a check on the document, but fraud has been referred to again and again through the Companies Act. And I'm very pleased with the definition of fraud, which I believe, in fact, is superior to the definition of fraud in the FUTP regulations of SEBI. So I'm quite happy with the way it's drafted. There are more liabilities under the prospectus. So if you make a misstatement in the prospectus, liabilities are less nuanced. So it's not the best of situation, but there's stronger repercussions if you make a misstatement in a prospectus at the time of doing a public offer. And I mean, last 2 points, I think insider trading is kind of very widely defined, which again creates trouble to the extent it's very well defined, I think. But it talks about it being applicable to companies, which I find slightly disturbing, because I think insider trading as a concept should apply only to listed companies, which is where the dissonance between shareholder rights and the insiders' rights comes into play. So I hope I think the companies, the ministry is in fact in talks with SEBI, and I think they're still figuring out whether they should apply it to all companies, because the act says company. So I hope they're able to whittle it down to listed companies. And I think the final point is, I think the courts, which has been, of course, the weak point of enforcing, whether it's mismanagement, oppression, whether it's shareholder rights. And Mr. Kumar referred to the Satyam case, which was actually not fought in India at all. It was fought in New York courts, and I happened to be one of the expert witnesses for the shareholders. And the problem, in fact, doesn't get solved with the Companies Act. I think it's a myth that the Companies Act provides anything new. Class action is already there under Civil Procedure Code. So long as there's a right to sue, you can file a class action in India. It's not happened for reasons which are kind of alignment of interests and the incentives. A person who has 100 shares is not likely to file a class action suit, because various things, including how lawyers are compensated in India. We don't get a cut of the fee as opposed to the American system, where they get 30% of all the damages go to the lawyer. So there is a strong incentive to file class action even by a small shareholder. And my last point really is about enforcement, which I don't think the Companies Act really solves, because a regulatory system, our ministries, all the people who, and of course most importantly the courts, provide very, very slow justice in India, if at all. So I think that's kind of the weak point. But thankfully what has happened is, if you look at it from a structural perspective, more and more responsibility has been given to all these entities which I referred to, including independent directors, auditors, all these various committees of a company. Fraud has to be reported straight. If it's a large fraud, it has to be reported straight by the auditor to the government. So I think all these internal checks and balances will ensure that less and less reliance is there on the government, and there are more internal checks and balances. So I hope overall it's going to be a much better regulatory system. Thank you.
Fantastic.